Okay, let me see here. Heidi ho. All right, I'm going to get on for a minute. Um, don't have a whole lot to say, but I want to, I guess, share a little story with you guys that it's one of those, I've had strange moments in my life, and very few that, really stand out. Like a lot of people have these moments, some stand out more than others. And like, how did that happen? You know, what were the odds of that? And they being so slim. Um, and one of those, and I want to share the story with you because I know what happened was, it was back in the 80s. I was living with my grandmother, of course, at the time, and we were living in this trailer in Bayside Park, and we were clearing out, or the family, I was very young at the time, were clearing out the property next door to us, and they were cutting down some of the pine trees on that property. And in doing so, one of the pine trees that came down had a nest in it. And within this nest, there was these little embryos. You could see like their little organs inside of them, and pink little see-through luminous. I don't know, that not luminous, but you could see through them. Sorry, but and you see the little heart beating and everything in the veins. Couldn't make out what they were. And my grandmother, she assumed that they were squirrels, being that they were up in the tree. And this sort of made sense, though they didn't look like squirrels. And then she took this eyedropper, and she filled it with some milk, or some sort of milk, and she gave it to these two little embryos. And I believe one of them was male, one was female. And one of them, he didn't survive the night. The first one, the little boy, we think it was a boy. I don't know how you tell, but we thought it was a boy. He passed away. We still didn't know what this little thing was. So my grandmother she made a little box in a shoe box and comforted, and she kept feeding it. And we kept seeing it grow. It was growing pretty fast. Within, I think, within a couple weeks or so, it started taking the form of a type of rodent of some sort, and started looking more like a squirrel. So we named her Squirrly Girly. That's what my grandmother named her, was Squirrly Girly. And my grandmother didn't have any intention of keeping her. She was just going to help her and give her a chance at life. That was my grandmother. And I'm around because of that. and but she she got this thing healthy, and this little squirrel had its little shoe box, next to my grandmother's nightstand in her bedroom. And the squirrel, she would let the squirrel out. We had this dog, a big Doberman. I mean, not a Doberman. We had a German Shepherd on the front lawn named Marvy was her name. And that was our guard dog. And Marvy sat on the front porch of our trailer garden. And we had a huge oak tree in the very front yard, a very old, big oak tree. Had to be 150 years old at least. It was a big one. And my grandmother would open the door and let the squirrel out, like go on. But the squirrel would go out and play in the tree, in that big oak tree in the front. And then we'd watch the squirrels because we'd leave the storm door shut, and the storm door was aluminum. And so we'd hear this little scratching on the storm door after letting her out, and you'd open it up and she'd come in the house. Well, of course, she thought she was part of the family. That was her family. So my grandmother didn't confine her, though. She let her come and go from the house. And the squirrel just kept sneaking past. We'd watch her sometimes. She'd get up on the porch. She'd have her mouth filled with acorns, and she'd be sneaking really slowly, looking at Marvy, our German Shepherd. And she'd be doing this to get up close to that storm door where she can get on there and start scratching, looking at It was funny. And then my grandma would open the door, we'd open the door. She'd fly in, she'd fly up my grandmother. She'd do about a bunch of little spins around her, landing on her shoulder or on her head, mostly her shoulder. And she'd always have her cheeks filled with stuff. And she loved my grandmother. She thought my grandmother was her mother. I guess that's how it goes. And but my grandma, like I say, she didn't confine her. But one day, my grandmother let her outside, and I'm going to tell the story the best that I can remember it. And she let her outside, and in broad daylight, we get those tropical storms that come out of nowhere on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. They just come out of nowhere. People down there who live in that environment know what I'm talking about. And it goes dark. It could be broad daylight, and you get just blackout, like a big old dark cloud comes in, and it gets windy and it gets storming. And that was one of these days, and she didn't come back in, and we waited for, man, the days went by and the weeks went by. My grandmother thought, well, she went on. It's the way my grandmother thought. She was worried about her, and we were all worried about her in that storm if she made it all right. But my grandmother just said, well, she went on and did what she's supposed to do in nature. And everybody felt, yeah, okay, grandma's cool with that. We're cool with it. It is the thing. We missed her, but she was gone, right? And then a couple weeks go by, and we get a call from a cousin of mine, uh, and they inform us that my cousin Teresa, and I think that's who it was. I can't remember that part, but it was someone in the family. But they had they were sitting there. I think it was Vanessa. Anyway, I was trying to remember. Anyway, but they said they were sitting there. It was late at night. I say late because I remember it was dark out. It was nighttime, and we got a call maybe when it was getting dusk or something, and from my cousin, and she said, "Are you guys missing a Squirrly Girly?" Because she knew of our squirrel, and yeah, she's been gone a couple weeks. My grandmother tells her, she goes, "I think I have her here." She says, "I was watching." She brings her over in a box, and sure enough, it's Squirrely Girly, because the squirrel jumps out and goes to my grandmother immediately. So my cousin explains that she was watching TV or something, and she's got a window right behind the TV, and she could see this. She realizes it was a squirrel peeking in upside down, looking at her upside down through the window at nighttime, and thought that was so strange. So she got up and opened the door, and the squirrel ran in and ran up on her, and that was abnormal. So she called us, of course, thinking that. And that's how weird is that alone. Now my cousin lived, though in the same neighborhood generally, she still lived miles away from us. Um, and there was many other houses between all of there that she could have went. So that was odd. And then when she brought her back that night in a little box, the squirrel was happy to see my grandmother. My grandmother got her little shoebox ready for her in her bed next to her on the nightstand. And I remember, from my point of view, I woke up the next morning to get up to go to school and get ready for the school bus, right? And my grandmother had Squirrely Girly had passed away that night, the very night she came in, and she had Squirrely laid out on a table on a towel, and she was in confusion. My grandmother, but wasn't too upset. She told us, she said she woke. She said my grandmother said that when she went to bed, when she laid down that night, my grandmother, to go to sleep, the squirrel was in her little box next to her nightstand. And she goes, as she was laying there, I don't remember if she was sleeping or not. I think my grandmother said she was sleeping. She goes, I woke up to, that's what it was. I woke up to Squirrely Girly biting my thumb. And I guess the squirrel woke her up biting her thumb, and she died, biting my grandmother's thumb. It was to wake her up, I guess, to This is strange stuff. This is a true story. This is a true story, and I'm not making any of this up. It's just one of those stories where you go, "Wow, what do you make of that?" And then we buried her underneath that oak tree in the front yard, and I've always thought about that squirrel and how attached she became to my grandmother, and how wherever she went in that time that she was gone, what happened to her. And yeah. And so I don't know. My wife said to me a while back, she goes, "You need to write a story about it." But I don't know what to do about the story anyway. But that's my story for you today. And maybe next time I get on, I'll have a song, or a song and a story about Squirrly Girly. But that's a weird little coincidence. Um, Papa J says, "Is that Dad?" I don't know who that is, Papa J. Papa J says, "Just start writing and everything will come to you." Okay, well, I did. Okay, so here we go. All right. All right. Now, this is the story that I came up with what happened to her in the 2 weeks that she was gone, you know. Okay. Okay. Squirrely Girly. Sciurini was an eastern gray squirrel from the swamp lands of South Mississippi, and was the daughter of Peepers and Gladys Sciurini of the Sciurini clan. Her mother, Gladys, was born in 1981 in Hinds County, Mississippi, and by 1986 mysteriously died, giving birth to her two twin babies, Girly and Skitty. Her father, Mr. Peepers Sciurini, was an Italian Sicilian immigrant pine squirrel who first migrated to Marietta, Georgia in 1982, and by 1983 he had built an empire on laundering pinyon nuts. In those days, you see, it was illegal to gather pinyon seeds for the intoxicating and euphoric effect that it gives to squirrels. So a prohibition was put in effect back in those days. Um, Peepers never fully recovered after losing Gladys, and so he began a downward spiral as a heavy pinyon addict. And by 1987, Mr. Peepers Sciurini was traumatically killed by a planter's truck while intoxicatingly crossing Highway 603 in Kiln, Mississippi, after he had abandoned his infant external embryos of his children, Girly and her twin brother Skittles, aka Skitty. After being abandoned, an unfortunate defrosting accident left Girly and her brother unconscious. And after some time, she was to learn that her brother didn't survive the fall. She was nursed back to health by a red-haired human that she called Mama Laura, who nurtured Girly physically, mentally, and spiritually, and helped train her in the ancient arts of Horifuk. By 1988, after a lifetime of training, she became a professional assassin, specially trained and hired by the CIA to specifically spy on and assassinate the North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. One day, while Squirrely was training in her favorite oak tree, a strong wind from the sky blew downward towards her. And looking upward, she could see that it was a Black Hawk helicopter extending a ladder towards her. This was it, the moment she was trained for. The excitement was too intense to describe. So Girly boarded the chopper and off to Korea she went. She arrived in South Korea, where she was snuck past the North Korean border with the help of a hedgehog named Kasumdochi. Kasumdochi was also a spy, but for South Korea. He nicknamed Squirrly Guillaume Saegi and disguised her as a male squirrel to sneak her into North Korea. Guillaume Saegi, or Girly, and Kasumdochi were spies undercover working as actors on a TV show called Squirrel and Hedgehog, where they became famous while keeping this deadly secret. It was their plan to assassinate North Korean leader Kim Jong il, first chance given. And that chance came on December 30th, 1987, specifically, when the supreme leader came to pay an unexpected visit to the actors. When introduced to the supreme leader, Kasum Dochi was to spread cyanide onto Kim's clothes, but in doing so, he cross-contaminated the cyanide, and before it was too late. As the supreme leader fell to the ground, Girly sliced his throat, where he bled to death. As she held her beloved dying Kasum Dochi in her arms, he smiled at her with victory and said, "Job well done," as he faded away. With North Korean officials surrounding the movie set, Girly felt a strong wind blowing downward from above. It's the Black Hawk helicopter. Oh my, where am I here? Lost my spot. Let me see. Oh boy. Okay. See, it was the Black Hawk helicopter, and it was there to drop a ladder to send Girly back home. And she arrived in that oak tree that they took her from. You see, time is a relative perspective, and squirrels do not live as long as we do. Girly did her job and made it back to her oak tree with her Mama Laura. And on that very night, she made it home. She woke Mama Laura up to say thank you for your love and goodbye. And she passed away in Mama Laura's hands. And she was buried under her favorite oak tree with her memory forever in my mind and deep within my heart. And that's my story I have of that I made up for Squirrly Girly. What do you do with that? I don't know. My wife says, write a children's book. I'm not, I'm a Grimm. When Grimms get a hold of tales, we turn them into grim tales. I'm a grim person. So it's going to have something grim in it. By the way, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, the brothers, German brothers, they were they put together from what I read, the German dictionary. And I don't believe they completed it in their lifetime. I think they started it or something like that. They were behind starting it, but it took a long time to complete. They were behind that, but they took all those stories and they put them together is what they did. They were tales that were told long before they were alive even. And if you look up the the Grimm's fairy tales, you can see, like if you look up some of the really old stuff before some of it started being censored, and rightfully so. I don't think it was so much so that I would say that the Grimm's brothers were racist themselves, but there's some anti-Semitism that goes on in a lot of their tales, and these are old tales once again that go way back. But it's very interesting stuff. Anyway, very grim nonetheless. Are there any Grimsteins out there or Grimbergs? Be interesting. Wish I were Jewish. I just found out that, and I'm not going to name names of who anybody is here, so I'm going to keep this out, but I'm just going to say that I learned of a very dear person to me, who never knew who his father was his whole life, his whole life. And he's in his 40s. His whole life, he's never known. And he recently found his father. And now sometimes that could be a really, where's that going to go? 50-50, maybe, I don't know. But he did that 23andMe thing, and he found his father in the long run. And his father is from Israel. His father's from Tel Aviv. And he speaks with a broken accent and all, man. Hebrew. I said, man, we had a little Hebrew running around in Mississippi all the while next to me. And I'm jealous now. But I'm so happy for him, man. This is something else. And that's all I'm going to say about him, because I'm not sure if he wants that to be known or anything, but I'm going to say that. I've been living on cloud nine for him. Yeah, I know he is. He's got to be. And it was a good outcome. His father's alive, and his father is healthy and has his own family, and he spent some time with him. So that's awesome. I'm just so happy for him, and that's good news. Um, There's Rudy Rodriguez. He says he's enjoying the heat in Odessa, Texas, where he's at. I'm sure he's throwing down some barbecue. Maybe not. I don't know. It's a little hot. It's a little hot. We've had it cool. It's cooled down. It's we've been around 109, so not exactly at 1010. 1010, 110. Let me see. We have um yeah, Papa J wants to know if I have any relation to the Grimm's brothers. I've done some research. My family have done research. So the thing is that there are no living descendants of direct bloodline to Jacob and Wilhelm that live today. We've done that research. But, however, I have an aunt, Barbara, in my family on the Grimm side that has done a lot of research on the Grimm family, and she's done the footwork. She's old school. She's been to the geographical locations of my ancestors, in fact, and what she found was my ancestors came in somewhere in the late 1700s, somewhere around the 1770s, oddly enough, around the beginning of our nation. And it was somewhere around, I want to say right around 1777 or 1778, somewhere in there. The boat arrived in Philadelphia. That there were two boats. One had this guy named Johann Agidius, which is not my direct bloodline, but is believed to be related to maybe even the brother of my ancestor, Johann Conrad. Conrad Grimm is my immigrant ancestor. And my Aunt Barbara knows where his house even exists today. His house still exists today, or I believe it does, on the property. She went to the property, and he's supposed to be buried on the property. She believed that she found where the plot is because it's an indent on the property that sort of indicates man dug there. That could be where Conrad is buried. Now, where did Conrad come from and Agidius? They came from, and it's believed they're related, maybe brothers. They came from some little place I can't remember I can't remember the name of the place in Germany. But one of the towns, I remember my Aunt Barbara, I want to say she told me that one of the towns they're from is not far or from the same town as Jacob and Wilhelm's Grimm's family. So we could be cousin relatives. I mean, we're from Germany with the name Grimm. it's more likely that we are of the same Grimm clan, you know, but not, I'm no direct descendant, and they don't have any direct descendants if you look up the Grimm's brothers. But that's to help answer that. Um, let's see. And that's about that. So I wanted to share my Squirrely Girly thing with you. And I don't know, I'll go back to some of the colors that I'm into right now. I'm collecting pigments, classical pigments. By the way, if anybody's out there that knows that they have some old oils in their attic, or some oil painting, oil for oil paints, old, talking about the stuff you can't even see the tubes. The tubes are just even older than this, and they're all just messed up, maybe used, and maybe too hard to even have anything usable. But that's wrong. I could still use it, because even if it's hard, I can cut these things open with gloves, because a lot of these old paints can be very toxic. But with gloves and a mask, I'll cut them open, and I can use these pigments. I can mull them back into usable paints, and well worth it, because cheap imitation colors, when in comparison, and I'm telling you, there's a big difference. I've been trying to get myself more into the colors and stuff, and I think appreciation to colors comes from actual, like, if I just take things like mica, this is a red mica powder, um, it's really not, it's beautiful, but it's not, you don't appreciate it, like, what is this? How difficult is it to achieve, to get these colors, that we have today? We take them all for granted. We do. And I didn't know this until I started studying the history of color, not just color theory, the science of color, but and the color theory is based on light, because that's what color is. But the history of color, and to know the history, and then once you learn the history, you start using some of these um, classical pigments and paint in the paints. You can see the difference. It's richer. It's more real. There's something to it, and you also, as an artist, appreciate it more so. I'm on my way to trying to be an artist. I've always been trying to get to some way of expressing myself in art, whether through music or visual. Um, so this is mica. I don't appreciate this as much, and this is beautiful. I can lay this out, and it makes just a beautiful. Mica is very beautiful. But I'd rather have this for a red, iron oxide. I mean, that's a beautiful, beautiful red. That's brick red. Makes for very beautiful reds. Or if I want a really nice red, cochineal. There you go, Joanne. Cochineal. Cochineal. Um, Very beautiful red. And like I say, I got my lapis lazuli. I need to get some more lapis. I made this, and I've been working on a project with it. This is very expensive stuff. I need to, and when they used to get this very precious lapis, they would stretch it out and make it last. Artists would, in ancient days, because of how precious. They wouldn't use it in that density of it. And that's about as dark as it's going to get right here, if you could see it. And you could spread that out. You could put a little bit of crushed eggshell with it, and spread it out, and then put a little more oil in it, use it as a glaze, and that's what they would do. Stuff like this here, I love this. This is called Indian yellow. Now, Indian yellow originally has a really bad reputation from the foul odor. It's got a very phosphorus smell, hence the phosphorus yellow that it gives. It's not a phosphorus yellow that you get from the illumination of phosphorus when it when it plasmas, when it turns into a fire. But this here, and this is like I don't know if this particular brand, I don't think so, but maybe. Um, used to make it from urine. Yeah, urine. Cow urine, supposedly. Supposedly, but you know, I'm thinking, well, if you have nothing else, if you don't have a cow, had a lot of asparagus to eat, can come up with your own dyes. And that's the way they used to make this stuff called, also, just on a chemistry side of this, since we're in that world, um, ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate, also known as saltpeter. I did a study on this for some reason. It's a long story, but I did a study on saltpeter. And so they would use saltpeter is very explosive, and you could use it in fertilizer, and it's very effective fertilizer, the acid. But it's a very effective explosive, as anyone who knows ammonium nitrate. And so what they used to do during the war, what I read was before this World War II, to obtain ammonium nitrate, there were different ways. You can mine it, and we had mines out here that would mine it during the war, um, but they didn't know how to do it outside of that other than pissing or peeing in bales of hay. There were two like different forms of doing it, where they would have people or use urine, I guess of any sort of urine, and pour it over piles of hay, and then they'd cover it or something, and then it would formulate the ammonium nitrate crystals. And I don't know if they added something else to it. I can't remember, but it was something like that. If you couldn't mine it, they would pee in or put urine in hay, and then they would obtain that way. Fun fact. And then, I think the Germans during the war, they figured out, from what I read, they figured out how to uh, make ammonium nitrate in a lab. America, Russia, I think we got our hands on it pretty early in the war. We got our hands on that information, and we were able to make it and manufacture it in the lab, luckily, because if the Germans only had that knowledge, that could have been bad. Anywho, that maybe next time I'll bring you another story about something else. But as I go into my stories, oh boy, they might start offending people. I don't know. So I have to stay very fictional, and I don't want to offend anyone as I go down some stories here. And you go, well, you're not offending me. Well, I'm not trying to, and I'm staying far away from that right now. But when I start touching on some of the stories in the near future, like when I'm bringing up things like this, this is a really good book, guys. I'm loving this. I'm loving this because this guy that put this together, Simon Sabag Montefiore. Anyway, he did a great job at putting together this book, and it tells the history of Jerusalem through a lot of the words of Josephus, of Flavius Josephus. I love Flavius Josephus and the studies there, and I had so much to study on him alone. What to pick from, what is real and what isn't. But you learn so much from this guy, even through some of the documents they'll say are not real documents that are his. They still are teaching you a lesson, one way or the other. And whether they are telling the truth or not, history has a way of not telling the truth. So I'm always critical when it comes to history. But Josephus writes a lot of really interesting stories based on the Jewish wars, the antiquities of the Jews. These are all very fun, very fascinating. I say fun; these are horrible stories, but they're fun to read, and I highly recommend this book, guys. It is a good. It's good because the guy put together Josephus's writings, Manetho, which Manetho, none of his writings exist today, but Josephus was a fan of Manetho, who was around about 300, 400 years before Josephus. And Josephus, you know, recorded a lot of Manetho's works. So we get to hear about the Ptolemaic eras through these historians like that. Um, what was really going on in Jerusalem is quite fascinating, and throughout Egypt and that whole area. It's a life study for me. I've been trying to connect dots because what I'm doing is I get all information, which is the first law of logic. Get all that information that I can, and believe you me, there is a more than a life's worth of information, and it's taken me that to even get where I have on what knowledge I have on it. And when the idea is, once I get all this information, then I can go through and, as I'm doing, point out the contradictions and start separating those things. Then it starts naturally. It's almost like when you're piecing a puzzle together. I'm not trying to put any pieces anywhere. I'm just putting them down, and then there's okay, that goes here. I could see where this goes. These are truths. These are truths. Okay, and then all of a sudden it starts. Once you get more information, take out the contradictions, you're left with excluded middles in a piece in front of you that's not fully complete, but it's starting to make a picture. You can start seeing things. And I am starting to see some things. I'm starting to see some things. I saw some things a long time ago. In frustration, putting it down, having to go back to it again from time to time. Listen to a lot of people on all their sides from it. Doesn't matter. Nobody gets outed on that one because I listen to everybody, and then I'm seeing something. I'm seeing something that's so interesting to me that if it were known to people, it would just it would change. It would really change the world so dramatically that it almost seems. And even if people knew it to be the truth or would accept it, or they wouldn't accept it, it'd just be hard. Too many lives, too many people dying over this stuff, man, that they're fighting over in the Middle East right now, in Israel. And things seem to be escalating even more. And man, I fear that we're about to be on the brink of another world war with Egypt and Lebanon getting involved in this, along with Iran. And over there, what's going on? I mean, God, Lord, man, what are we going to do here? Don't. Oh man. So I'm like, well, what do you do? What are you really fighting over there, guys? Well, it's more than just religion, and it's more than just land. This has to deal with, a lot of you killed my family yesterday and today, and the facts of the matter is that we're not going to see the end of this in our lifetime. It's too close to home for everybody out there, in the heart of that. And it's those that are going to want the peace, because no matter what truths you bring to the table, It's almost like you just don't see it ending until I guess the truth is known. But the truth has to be accepted. And the truth has, and to accept the truth would be to all agree. And that's a difficult thing. We're talking about three major religions. Abrahamic religions, all three agree on that, but past that point, no. And then it's just a bunch of wars, and it's sad. But next time I get on, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm working it up. I'm working the best way I can present this story. And it's just going to be a story on its own. And you're going to look at it as fiction, and that's the way I'm going to present it, as fiction. A lot of it's hypotheticals, but only drawing the lines, the hypothetical lines between the actual factual dots, between the actual evidence that's there, and that's the archaeological evidence. And coming from that point of view has a different perspective, one of which that all three religions will look at and just go, there's one, if yeah, it seems so bizarre. It would just seem so bizarre to all three what archaeology is saying. So therefore, you go, well, archaeology, science, whatever it's saying there should be based on, it's not an exact science though, but we are talking about things that are written in stone and papyrus that I'm going off of, and things that exist today, and not word of mouth, not woozle trails. I don't do woozle trails. I don't like those. When I find myself finding myself following my own footsteps, I'm like, no, I get off of that. No. That means conspiracies and all of that. I do believe in I do know conspiracies exist, but I don't go down that world. I don't do that. I'm looking for the truth, and in doing so, I don't like being clouded up with belief systems and ad hominems that get involved, and it's difficult to get through those and weed through them. But anyway, so I'll share that with you next time. I'm working the story up, and I'm going to tell it away from anything else and tell it by itself, and then those of you can hate me if you want, but it's all going to be based off of archaeology. So you just hate what the ancients left behind, if that's the case, because that would be really what I want to present to you. And then you could say, well, you can relate it to that if you want to, but that's not what I'm going to be relating it to. It's going to be its own story. Anyway. So Papa J says, cute urine. Mm-hmm. They had to get creative back in those days. Yes, they did. Think of the days back then. We're talking about color. He's talking about urine color. I know it's a weird topic. Urine. Look, urine. There you go. Indian yellow. That's what they called it back then. I think it has different names for it. Urine. Cow urine. Yellow. Or buffalo urine. Anyway. So yeah, they were creative. But Indian green. Wonder where that comes from. India, anyway. And I think what I read on this was, when it says Indian, it's not talking about Native American. It is actually talking about Eastern India, Hindu India. And they would use this color. And they revere cows out there. I don't think they I don't think beef is on the menu on a Hindu menu. Um, they revere the cow. Maybe so. I don't think it is. I don't know much about the beautiful religion of Hindu. Very interesting, beautiful religion, but very colorful religion too, man. They they go they go after colors hard, man. The chakra, and all of that, and they like to throw dyes, special occasions. I don't know. Somebody tell me what those celebrations and rituals are. I love them though. I think it's awesome. It's a whole different world over there in the East, man. When I get into that, I'm like, wow, wow, the history in the East, wow, and what we can know about it. Like in Chinese culture. When I was in China, I, I was in, for example, I was with this interpreter the whole time, right? And he thought he was a failure. I'm not kidding. He thought he was a failure. He only had 3 degrees, 3 college degrees. I don't think he was 25 yet either. And he said, my life's over. This is how hard they are on themselves in China. I am not kidding. But I asked him, I don't know, I asked him about the history of China, and I said the first emperor, fascinates me, of China, and his name was Qin Shi Huangdi, meaning the first emperor Qin. His name was Qin, which is what China's named after, right? But the guy didn't know, and he goes, Mao, and I'm like, no, long before Mao, long, over 2,000 years before Mao. He's like, no, no. So it's like we get what information we can from them. I know that from firsthand that something's wrong with that. That man with 3 degrees knew nothing about the first emperor of China. Maybe I just ran across a really strange, rare case there. But anyway, you have some fascinating history. Qin Shi Huangdi is one of my fascinations in China. Yeah, first emperor. He's the guy with all those terracotta soldiers that they dug up the tens of thousands of those things, and his tomb still sits under this mound and undisturbed. It's exciting stuff. Anyway, a lot of history out there. I still have yet to get into. Um, Exciting. That's why you never stop learning. You never stop learning. When you think you know everything, think again. We're all ignorant. By the way, everybody's ignorant, just so you know. Everybody's ignorant. Please don't take that offensively. We're all ignorant. Our arrogance tells us that we're not. Our arrogance will say, yeah, but don't call anyone ignorant. They'll take that offensively. Maybe so. Maybe if you're smart, you wouldn't want to do that to get punched or something. But we all are ignorant, because that just means we all ignore things, and the things that we ignore, we don't find interesting, and you will be ignorant. We can't know everything, pick and choose in the short time that we have. But we all are ignorant. How ignorant? I don't know. It's a relative question. I will say for myself, I am very ignorant. I am very ignorant, very ignorant. But I'm fascinated, and I'm always trying to learn more, because, and it's only for me. I just love the stories, and I love having what are called aha moments. Those are rare for me to have in life, but I've had them, and when they happen, oh, they feel good, and you feel like the only person that knows that, which it's probably more than likely not the case, but you feel like it. You're like, when you figure something out, or that's how that works. That's how you do. So that's the history. That's the real story. Okay. All right. Okay. And then we die. And then, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, we try to learn everything only in a moment to just go, just be gone. maybe, and then to wake up in some other realm, we can talk about that on a different perspective. But all right, guys. All right. Let's see here, guys. I appreciate you listening to me jibber jabber. And speaking of jibber jabber, also that space, man. I've been watching the Kepler and all of the new stuff they're finding. Man, it's fascinating that are questioning our universe. Even that's some new stuff right there, man. So now they got to go back to the drawing boards a little bit here on I think they should on a lot of it because that's just my opinion on quantum physics. But this thing that they're seeing is bringing them back to readjust some relative math here. It's not too. I don't think it messes with any Einstein's theories, but they're showing that the universe, galaxies came together within a few 100 million years of the Big Bang. That's than a lot sooner than what than what was ever predicted. Um, yeah, that's it's pretty fascinating. And by the way, I think we're somewhere in the realm of I want to say 13 point something 7 billion years old if you believe in science. I know people that don't believe in science. I know people that have contested I don't believe in science. Okay. Um, if not believe in science, maybe believe in the concept of being able to measure. Some people say, well, you can't measure everything. Yeah, yeah. I think you can. I think you can. And and if not, prove me you can't because there's nothing there in those moments. So it's a weird debate. Anyway, okay, so I'm gonna go dive back into my world here. And I love you all. I'll talk to you later. See you next Thursday. God bless.